Thank you. Welcome. We're here at the science segment of Impact. It's our maiden voyage, and I am pleased to have my guest here today, Jim Napolitano, PhD from RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. Welcome. Good to see you, Jim.
Good to see you too, Barb. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
I'm so excited that you're my first guest and that we can talk about little things today. Before we talk about small stuff, particle physics, I wanted to talk about some of the big stuff, those balls in the sky that we see. So could we talk about like the solar system's composition and how the sun came to be and what we know about the sun and its previous history?
Sure. Well, this is something that's not my research field, but in fact I've had some opportunity to learn about it. I've taught astronomy and seen these things, and I've also picked up some things from the Center for the Origins of Life, which is
at RPI.
Which is led at RPI. Yeah, we've talked about these things. So I have colleagues who do this. So the solar system, the sun, is about 4.5 billion years old, which is may sound like a long time, but in fact it's only about 1/3 of the length that the universe has existed, going back to the Big Bang. So the sun and the solar system are made out of recycled material. As our galaxy evolved over the past 13 billion years or so, there were stars were formed, and then they became exploded out, and that material got mixed up with the rest of the galaxy, and then all of a sudden another clump came by, and after a recycle or two, we ended up with our solar system.
Wow, so we're kind of like the ultimate recycle project?
In a large sense, that's really true. One of the things that's very fascinating is that if you look at the abundances of elements that come in from meteorites so that we know what the solar system is sort of made of, you can see specific signatures of elements that were created in one type of star that we call a red giant. You can see evidence of other types of stars that were likely ended up in supernova. These things all mixed up and created the little bits and pieces that created our solar system.
So I've read that all of the elements on the periodic table up to iron we can explain through a first generation star, but our star, even though it's kind of normal and kind of plain to us, is really spectacular because we have a larger abundance of elements in that star.
A lot of that is, I guess I'd say, basically correct. Iron is a special element because it is the most stable nucleus. It costs you more energy to pull all the pieces out of an iron nucleus than it does just about anything else. We do know that in so-called first-generation stars, it is possible to make some very heavy elements by sort of neutrons capturing on other things in the atmospheres of red giant stars, and this is one of the signatures that we have to know that we were recycled from one of those stars. But one of the things very clear, the very first time a star is made in the universe, when it was born, was almost entirely just hydrogen and helium. And if you look at a star that was born out of that mixture, about 25% helium, the rest hydrogen, it ends up making, with a star like our sun, it makes some carbon and a few other things, but it pretty much stops there. So we know that to get even into iron, you need more than just a first generation star. You need some other mixing, some particularly heavy stuff that's able to burn things. And that could happen.
We see on this planet, we see uranium, which is a really heavy one, barium, I'm trying to think of some other, neon or argon, those would be pretty heavy.
Light. Well, those are relatively light.
Ultimately light, but that shows us that we're the product of other supernovae?
The thing that's most striking to show us that we're products of supernovae are by looking at a very special class of extremely heavy nuclei. If you look at the way nuclei are put together, and this is really some basic nuclear physics, what you discover is that for certain numbers of protons and neutrons, if you put them together, you get a particularly stable nucleus. Nuclear physicists call this islands of stability.
Islands of stability, a new ride at Disney.
That wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Some of the more common examples are tin, lead, I think barium may be one. I'd have to think a little bit. So there are some elements where signatures are that's the case. And if you see those elements very clearly, that tells you that they were created slowly, and we see some processes in stars where that could happen. We see some very interesting evidence, though, of abundances of elements that are close to these magic numbers, but a little bit further away. It's very distinct separate signatures. Those had to be formed in such a way so that the neutrons that are added to these islands of stability
in that nucleus,
that nucleus, that had to happen so quickly that before the nucleus, which would have been radioactive, decayed away, it captured a neutron and turned into something else.
Ooh.
So very rapidly they climb up the ladder, and that can only happen in environments that are extremely intense with very high neutrons. And our best guess is that that happened in supernovae, although I know from some people, Professor Becky Sermon, for example, at Union, could explain how we just don't really know exactly how that happened. So there's some mysteries. Our best guess are supernovae, but there are a lot of problems that need to be solved to understand where we came from.